San Diego. There it is. Yeah, I can't say it's humid compared to where all people live, where it's really humid.
Yes, no.
Although
it's humid. Yeah, in Houston right now, it is not humid in Houston at the moment. We are in our winter or fall, let's say fall, and which means just no humidity. So it's in the 70s and 90s, but no humidity. So we'll take that. And as long as that cold front pushes through, so it sends our tropical storm over to Louisiana, I feel bad for all those people in Louisiana and, Mobile and, Florida Panhandle. They've been hammered all year with hurricanes. It's crazy.
So bad. For those of you that are just joining as attendees, if you are not using Google Chrome, we suggest that you do. This webinar page seems to work best on Google Chrome. So if you're having issues or difficulties, you might want to switch over. We are at 11. We'll give people a few more minutes to come in, I guess.
I'm absolutely going to break a webinar faux pas rule, but I suppose everybody's going to watch the VP debates tonight. no talking politics in a webinar, I'm sure, is a norm. But
yeah, they're pretty much did it prime time, so
yeah,
especially for the East. I don't know what they're competing against.
I'm just curious, can you see the cursor on the slides or no?
No.
Okay. We've got Woodbury Heights, New Jersey, and Chicago, and Webster, Texas, and San Diego, and Colorado. I know we've got somebody from Tennessee.
North Carolina.
That's a nice place. Asheville.
Yes, it is. Smoky Mountains. Versus Stephen, your Rocky Mountains. Big difference between the two.
Yeah, I don't want to put down the other mountain. We'll take on the Smoky Mountains anytime. Boston, very nice. I walked the Freedom Trail in Boston this summer. That was really fun. Oh, the minor league baseball team. Okay. All right. Yeah. I wish we had minor league baseball here in Colorado, because I remember going, as a child, and it was just so fun to see professional baseball, but at a reasonable price, and close to the players, and man, to go to a baseball game before COVID, that's $10 hot dogs and parking and thousands of people and traffic jams getting in and out.
All right. So it's we've given everybody a little bit of time, so I think we'll just get started. I'd like to welcome everybody who's joining to another webinar within the Thomas. We'll just call it a chain of webinars, given we're looking at cold chain compliance here today. I will introduce myself. My name is Antimony Dewing. I am a recent addition to the Thomas Scientific team on the sales side of things. I basically have been working behind a bench in vivariums, you name it. I've been there, screening centers for the last 20 years, working mainly developing small molecules and putting those through a drug candidate hit identification, all the way through preclinical testing, including in vivo and ex vivo. I would like to pass this over to Cindy now, who will be one of our co-hosts this morning.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Cindy Giesler, and I have been with Traceable Products for many years, let's say more than 20, and I have quite a bit of experience in clinical and vaccine industries, and looking forward to giving you some information on these fields today.
And I am Stephen Rowley. I have been involved in sensor technology for most of my career. For the past couple of years, I've focused on temperature monitoring and relative humidity, pressure sensing, CO2 gas monitoring. So I am responsible largely for technical support of the temperature data loggers and thermometers. So we will go ahead and get kind of right into the presentation. So this is the agenda for today. So these are some of the things that we hope that you'll come away with learning. What is cold chain? You know, what are we talking about when we talk about the cold chain supply process? We'll take a little bit of an in-depth look at it from a modern day application, of course, that relates to COVID and the upcoming distribution of vaccines, which are going to require cold chain solutions. And specifically, we will be looking at monitoring temperature throughout the cold chain, both from the vantage point of storage as well as transport applications. And then certainly we want to address any questions that may come up. We will save those questions to the end, but certainly if you have a question during the presentation, type it into the chat. We will be monitoring that. We will try and address that at the end. Additionally, we do have a few poll questions that will occur throughout this presentation. And part of the reason for doing that is we want to hear from you about what challenges you may be experiencing or what your viewpoint is. And as part of an incentive to participate there, we will be doing quite a number of drawings after the webinar for people that participate in those polls for some Starbucks gift cards. So certainly if you need your caffeine fix, make sure that you participate in those poll questions, give us some feedback, and we will enter you into some drawings and follow up with you after the webinar if you've won those Starbucks gift cards.
They're easy question, guys. Hang in there. You can win them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with just exploring what is cold chain. So cold chain is basically the process of moving temperature sensitive materials from one location to another. So initially, a customer might order a product from a supplier. It may be a temperature sensitive product, and so it's got to go through a transport process. Sometimes it goes through a storage process in the middle of this cold chain workflow. It may go back into a transport process until finally that particular product is delivered to an end customer. So you can see here some simplified workflows that explore a couple of the major industries and markets where cold chain is present. So obviously we all know food and beverage. I mean, all the meat products and dairy products that are delivered to your grocery and retail stores, they're coming from the farms. They go into temperature controlled transport, freight containers and trucks. Sometimes they're stored for long periods of time in food warehouses or frozen warehouses that will store and ultimately distribute those products to the end retail locations. But we also have workflows directed towards biopharma and biotech, and we're going to specifically dive into those a little bit more here with vaccine monitoring. But same thing, you know, the application is the drug manufacturers develop the drugs, and then they ship those drugs to the point of administration. But there's a lot of steps there that require temperature control and temperature storage and temperature monitoring throughout that process. And again, also in healthcare, you know, blood products are a prime example. When you give or donate blood, that blood is stored in very controlled conditions and processed under temperature controlled conditions and ultimately distributed to other patients potentially after being stored in temperature controlled conditions. But this is a very, very simplified schematic. I mean, if you think of that whole process, like for a vaccine going from a pharma manufacturer to just the airport, for example, it's got to go in a temperature controlled truck. Then it's going to sit on the tarmac under temperature controlled conditions. It's going to fly someplace under temperature controlled conditions. It's going to be stored in a warehouse once it gets to the end destination or to the end warehouse. So it's a very logistically complex product, even though it's simplified here for us. Some of those temperature sensitive products, as I mentioned previously, food and beverage was one of those. Vaccines from the biopharma and pharmaceutical process. We have medical products such as blood, as we discussed, insulin, various types of medications. We have a lot of active pharmaceutical ingredients and end products, of course, that are very temperature sensitive. Chemical reagents that are used throughout many different types of industries are also temperature sensitive. Food, of course, fruits and vegetables, dairy, meat, seafoods. Wine is one particular one that is also temperature sensitive.
Yes, as I found out, you know, this summer on lockdown, ordering my wine online, it got here rather hot down here near Houston, Texas. So, you know, I wish it had arrived a little cooler.
Yes, wine is something that you don't really want to mess with, and I didn't realize until this year that there is such a thing as a wine slushy. Although I think wine connoisseurs would tend to probably hold their noses up at that, but that is a thing. But there's a picture there that shows a very expensive, like $15,000 bottle of wine that arrived frozen, and just certainly if you're spending that kind of money, you want to make sure that you get a nicely controlled product. So. These are just some examples of temperature sensitive products. So we are going to take our first poll question. As I mentioned, this will give you the opportunity to be entered to win a Starbucks gift card. And so that poll will be administered now. So these are the questions for the poll. What temperature range are you most interested in? So we have a couple of different temperature ranges listed there. Ambient temperatures, which typically between 0 and 50 degrees C. We have a refrigerator or frozen temperature range from -50 to about +10 degrees C. Ultra low temperatures, which encapsulate about -90 to -50 degrees C or so. And then liquid nitrogen temperatures, -200 to -90 degrees C. So if you select one of those, go ahead and click on the buttons and let's see what temperature range are you most interested in. And again, participate and you'll be entered to win one of many Starbucks gift cards.
Many.
Yeah, and with Halloween coming up, it's that, you know, liquid nitrogen, that LN2, you know, the dry ice that makes that fun Halloween smoke for everybody. So I'd be choosing that one, although it doesn't pertain to the webinar today.
Well, I know not everybody can see the results of this polling, but approximately 60% of the participants are most interested in refrigerator and freezer temperature control, so -50 to about +10 degrees C, and then about 31% are most interested in ultra low temperature from -90 to 50 degrees C. So that's pretty interesting. That encapsulates about 90% of the participants in those two temperature ranges. So thanks for participating. We can close that poll now, and we will move on. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the current application, which is of course relevant in today's environment. And this is looking at cold chain from the perspective of the COVID-19 vaccine. So everybody, of course, is waiting for this. Life has been significantly disrupted for the past 6 to 8 months or so. Everybody is just anticipating the vaccines. There have been significant sums of money distributed in anticipation of this for the development of the drugs and also for the preparation of administering these drugs. So the US government has spent significant sums of money through Operation Warp Speed, and countries outside of the US are also spending quite a lot of money in order to deliver this particular vaccine. There are a significant amount of vaccine candidates. So there's almost 200 vaccine candidates throughout the process. The majority are still in preclinical trial stages. In the US, we have 4 main companies that are involved in phase 3 clinical trials, which is the large scale clinical trials where drugs are administered to a lot of people based on locations and race and ethnicity and gender in order to ensure that the drugs are effective as well as safe to use. And those vaccine candidates include Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, which currently their phase 3 trial is on pause in the US, and Johnson & Johnson. And these vaccines fall into a number of different types of vaccines. I'm not going to go through those because, to be honest, they're a little bit too complex for me to understand the biochemistry behind them. But certainly there's a number of different tactics that companies are working on. But what's really interesting about these vaccine candidates is that all of them will have different cold chain requirements, meaning their transport temperatures as well as their storage temperatures will be different for each of these candidates. Now, typically they will be lumped into certain groups, for ultra low temperature freezers or standard refrigerator freezers or minus 20 degrees C. But in general, every vaccine candidate will have a different sensitivity to temperature. So you can see here that probably the one that is in the news the most is Pfizer. That seems to be the one that is furthest along in their clinical trials with expected announcements about their efficacy and safety, potentially as soon as later in October or in early November. But the transport temperature for that is minus 70 degrees C. So that's an ultra low temperature vaccine candidate. Whereas you look at the other candidates from Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, both of those would only need to be shipped at minus 20 degrees C conditions. And same if you look at the storage temperature and time conditions for each of the vaccines. You can see that, again, they range from minus 70 degrees C to minus 20 for storage. And then once you start to get closer to the administration sites, you can take them out and store them in refrigerators from 2 to 8 degrees C for a certain length of time, and then even into room conditions or ambient conditions for a certain length of time. So just to say, this whole process of cold chain monitoring starts from the manufacturing and goes all the way up till administration, and that whole time period needs to be monitored and closely temperature controlled. Okay, just to talk a little bit about the temperature sensitivity of vaccines. This is just a quick infographic about the temperature sensitivity of historical vaccines. And you can see that vaccines, of course, have quite a lot of temperature sensitivity. If you look on the left side, you can see their sensitivity to heat or rising temperatures. And on the bottom axis, or the x-axis, you can see the freeze sensitivity. And it's not clear yet from the manufacturer's data where exactly the COVID-19 vaccine will sit, but given what we know about where their storage temperatures are, as well as their transport temperatures, it's very likely that they are going to be very sensitive to both heat and freeze sensitivity. So it's going to be probably in this upper right-hand quadrant, very similar to the influenza vaccines that come out, or even more sensitive from a freeze perspective. So that's likely where we are going to end up, and that's why temperature control is so important for this particular COVID vaccine. As I mentioned very early on, the government, through Operation Warp Speed, is defining how these vaccines are going to be distributed. And we know that there's really two major ranges of vaccines. One will be an ultra low temperature vaccine, and the others will be either refrigerated or frozen vaccines. The ultra low temperature vaccines will go from the contract manufacturer, such as Pfizer, direct to the administration sites. And the frozen or refrigerated vaccines will actually go from the contract manufacturer to a distributor, and then potentially to even sub-distributors before finally arriving at the administration site. So that whole process of cold chain, of course, needs to be monitored for temperature during the transport process. And we're going to talk about a couple of those products a little bit later on, the TraceableGO in the bottom left-hand corner and the Traceable One, which are used for monitoring temperature during that cold chain process. The administration side of it, where you're actually going to be receiving this vaccine, whether that's at the hospital or the pharmacy or a clinic or a workplace site, they will also have to store and monitor the temperature of those vaccines. And in order to do that, of course, we have temperature data loggers for the purpose of storing and monitoring vaccines. And those will include the Excursion Track USB temperature data logger, as well as the TraceableLIVE internet connected data logger. So we'll talk a little bit more about those in the next few slides. As part of being a provider of the COVID-19 vaccine, in order to enroll, you have to prove that you have the capability to store these vaccines at an appropriate temperature. So the refrigeration capabilities and the freezer capabilities, whether it's ultra low temperature freezers or a minus 20 degrees freezer, is crucial. And providers will have to provide that information to their local state department of health and ultimately to the CDC. So it's a requirement that they actually prove that either via identifying the make and model and even a photo of those refrigerators and freezers. But additionally, they also have to prove that they can maintain those required temperatures. And in order to do that, they have to prove that they have the right ability to monitor temperature at all times. And that gets into the temperature data logging requirements. Those temperature data logging requirements are dictated by the CDC. So the CDC has a vaccine storage and handling toolkit. The latest edition was released in January of 2020, which defines in their recommendations for monitoring vaccines within that cold storage equipment. And some of those recommendations, including ensuring that that monitoring occurs with a digital data logger with some of the following features: a detachable probe and a probe that best reflects the vaccine temperature. So this is a probe that typically is what we consider a bottle probe. So it looks very similar to this. It looks like a vaccine. It's got some liquid in it, and it has quite a large thermal mass. So when you open and close the refrigerator door to remove the vaccines, it's not going to reflect a very large temperature spike. So it's very similar to the temperature that the vaccine is experiencing. It also has accuracy requirements and also logging interval requirements, as well as ensuring that the device has a valid certificate of calibration. And that certificate of calibration has to meet a number of different requirements. So it has to include the make and model and serial number, but most importantly, it has to be issued by an appropriate entity. And that could be an entity that is NIST traceable or ISO 17025. It's an ISO 17. It's completed in an ISO 17025 facility. It's NIST traceable, and it could be also accredited by different accreditation organizations, including the A2LA, which is an American Association of Laboratory Accreditations, or ILAC, which is an International Laboratory Accreditation Consortium. So it has to be issued by one of those entities and accredited by one of those entities as well. The calibration also has to be done every 1 or 2 years per the manufacturer's recommendation. So we will talk a little bit more about those NIST certificates coming up. And then finally, for the transport portion of the vaccine, of course, those guidelines that I just talked about, those were for the storage portion. So when you're actually monitoring the storage conditions of that, those refrigerators and freezers and ultra low temperature freezers, for the transport portion, the requirements and recommendations from the CDC, they're not quite as strict because it's much more difficult to monitor temperature while a product is moving, but they still require that temperature to be monitored, but they have a little bit less stringent requirements. So they do require a digital data logger with a buffered bottle probe for each container, the same accuracy requirements, and a valid certificate of calibration. But you may notice that there wasn't a specific alarm requirement. So I did say that it had to have an audible or a visual alarm, which is required for the storage conditions. So there are definitely different recommendations for storage versus transport from the CDC. And Thomas Scientific, of course, we are ready to recommend the right product for you if you have any questions on those CDC recommendations. There are a number of other cold chain regulatory bodies. So I have been talking about this from the perspective of the vaccines for COVID. However, of course, we know that food products and other medical products are transported under cold chain conditions. And there's a number of regulatory bodies that specify the transport of those products and what temperature monitoring requirements exist for the movement of those particular products. And those could come from not only the CDC, but the FDA or the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institute of Health. If you're over in Europe, it's typically defined by the European Medicines Agency or the European CDC, which is the ECDC. And then as part of the Department of Health and Homeland Security, which encompasses CDC and FDA, there's also the Center for Medicaid Services, Medicare and Medicaid Services. So all of these regulatory bodies define how particular products are monitored for temperature during the cold chain process. Okay, so it's time for our second polling question. So again, we appreciate your participation here. Again, you will be entered again for the Starbucks gift card. So let's go ahead and open those polls up. Okay, so the first question, I believe, is, are you currently using digital temperature data loggers? So we'll give everybody a couple of seconds to enter in their response. And we are 50-50, so half of the participants are, well, about 53% of the participants are currently using digital temperature data loggers and 47% are not. So this will be really interesting information coming up because we're going to get into more of the specifics on the digital temperature data loggers. And we can close this poll, and I believe we have one other polling question here. Perhaps not. Okay, so we will go ahead and move on. I was mistaken about that second polling question.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take over here, Stephen. Thank you for all that information. I want to tell you a little bit about the Thomas Scientific traceable products. The Thomas Scientific provides traceable product solutions, like Stephen said, for almost any industry: healthcare, laboratory, industrial, any place you have to keep something at a certain temperature. You're probably going to be using a Thomas Scientific traceable products. We've got the solution no matter what industry. And the Traceable brand is a global leader in designing, manufacturing, serialized, calibrated, and certified lab instruments for over 40 years. And we are committed to serve our customers during this pandemic by bringing information and product awareness, enabling you to make informed decisions on your needs for cold chain products. So I'm going to back up a little bit about our traceable products, specifically the temperature ones. You know, back when I was a med tech, 20-something years ago maybe, we just had a regular thermometer in our refrigerator. It said it was, 6 degrees C. You checked off a pencil and paper and everything was good. Well, more and more regulations insisted that you have that bottle probe. So we created this bottle probe to mimic, like Stephen said, the temperatures of the things in your refrigerator, not your refrigerator air temperature. So anyone who has a teenage boy knows if they left that refrigerator door hanging open, the air temperature changes almost immediately, but your milk stays, cool for a little while. So that's what the bottle probe is used to mimic that type of environment. It does have the min-max memory, so you can see how hot and cold it got since the last time you cleared it. Plus it has high-low alarms. So if it gets too hot or too cold in your refrigerator, an alarm sounds and lets you know something's going wrong. Of course, as we move along, more data was required. So we added this digital Datalogger feature to our traceable refrigerator freezers thermometers. These we designed specifically so that you can leave the thermometer attached to your refrigerator. You take the little USB jump drive, plug it into the thermometer, download the data, take it back to your computer, plug it in, upload, it automatically uploads a CSV file with all the data. A unique feature I'll tell you about a little bit later. And the last one, of course, is in this day and age, everybody is connecting to the Internet of Things. So we now have a digital data logger that does that as well. But all of the traceable products have one thing in common, and that is include a traceable certificate of calibration from an ISO 17025 A2LA accredited calibration lab. So A2LA, like Stephen said earlier, is the American Association for Laboratory Accreditation. They're the auditing body in the United States for the ISO 17025 calibration standard. So as a member of A2LA and through ILAC MRA, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, all of the auditing bodies for ISO 17025 calibration standard got together and say, hey, I'll recognize your certificate if you recognize my certificate. And that became the mutual recognition agreement. And so that all of our traceable certificates included with the thermometers we're talking about are recognized throughout all of those green areas within the world. So if you are a global company, if you purchase a certificate here in the United States and ship it overseas, it absolutely will still meet the requirements of like France or the UK or Germany, Australia, wherever you'd send your products. So next I want to focus on the storage portion. Oh, I almost forgot there's a poll. So if you will go ahead and start the poll, don't forget to, if you participate, you get that Starbucks gift card. And so here's the question: have you experienced product damage or loss because of temperature excursions?
Yeah, so we'll give it a few seconds, Cindy. So we have about 60% of the participants currently saying no. We have about 25% that have said, yes, we've experienced less than $10,000 in damage or loss. And we have about 10% that are saying yes with over $100,000 in damage or loss. So that's definitely quite interesting to just consider how much damage can occur and potentially be avoided by utilizing some of these temperature data loggers that you're going to get into next. So
Yes, and so the storage portion is very important, and that's what I want to talk about next, is the products that will help minimize those losses, because like Stephen said, they could be very costly. I mean, storage is any place you basically have a refrigerator, a freezer. I kind of think of it as it's not moving, like the transit portion is moving and refrigerators and freezers normally don't move around. So, you know, like an ice cream manufacturer, they've got to store the ice cream, you know, in their location. And then they have to store it in a distribution warehouse. And then they have to store it again at the grocery store, because nobody wants to go pick up their ice cream, take it home, open it up, and you usually can tell if it's been frozen and thawed and refrozen. So we want to try and avoid that. So we're going to talk mostly about the storage portion next. And I think there might be another question here. Maybe it was in a different spot, but let's go on and I'll talk to you about the our Traceable Excursion Track USB Datalogger. I mentioned it earlier. It does meet all of those CDC recommendations that Stephen talked about, with the alarm, the bottle probe, the certificate of calibration. But our report is unique, is that it actually gives you 10 excursions on the report. So once you plug in that Datalogger and up comes the report, if there was an excursion, it's going to tell you it went out at 2:05 a.m. and came back at 2:10 a.m. or it went out at 2:05 a.m. and came back at 5:30 a.m. So was it out for 5 minutes or 3 hours? This does make a big difference in the efficacy of the vaccines that are stored in that refrigerator. So this unit is also available in ultra lows and in the, you know, my favorite, that LN2 liquid nitrogen level. So the Traceable Excursion Track does give you over 525,000 data points, plus a graph on there, plus then the excursion alarms that let you know exactly how long your refrigerator or freezer was outside of the range. Now, Stephen, I think you're going to tell us a little more about the connected devices.
Yeah, so as Cindy mentioned, kind of the next level of monitoring that has taken place over the past 5 years have been to internet connected data loggers. I mean, it's very similar to utilizing a Nest thermostat in your house. If you have a product such as that, it's so easy to see the temperature inside of your house, whether you're there or on the road. It's easy to get an alert when the temperature falls below, you know, a certain value. You may want to go and call your furnace repairman because maybe your furnace gave out, or shut off your water if that happens. I mean, it's having that data available 24/7 is very important, and that's what these internet connected data loggers do. So just as Cindy mentioned with the CDC recommendations, all of the TraceableLIVE internet data loggers meet the CDC recommendations. We have a wide variety of products that will meet a number of different ranges, including standard refrigerators and freezers, ultra low temperatures, liquid nitrogen, and even high temperature ovens. Because these are on the internet, the data is stored in the cloud, which provides unlimited data storage. And these are very simple to utilize and set up. So it's probably about a 5-minute process to set these products up. And they are scalable. So you don't have to buy a whole system. You can start with one and you know, add devices as your company or as your needs grow. But the intent and the process of how these data loggers work is that you have the temperature data logger. It's securely transmitting data to a cloud hosting platform, and we utilize Microsoft Azure for our cloud hosting platform that securely stores the data in the cloud. And the benefit, of course, is that of data being in the cloud is that it allows you to access that data 24/7, no matter where you are, as long as you have an internet connected device. So that could be, you know, from your desk, which is away from the lab, or it could be at home, or it could be on your smartphone while you're on the go. The second major advantage of these products is that they provide real-time notifications. So the instant that your temperature goes out of control, it will send you a SMS text or an email or a push notification to your smartphone to say, your temperature, your cold storage equipment is out of temperature control. You need to go investigate it or send somebody in to help resolve it. So you do not risk the damage or the product loss with an internet connected data logger. Okay. So the portfolio, as I mentioned, is quite broad. In addition to temperature monitoring, which again covers a range of -200 to +300 degrees C, we also have multi-parameter units that monitor CO2 or barometric pressure or relative humidity, so you can get more than one parameter on a device. And we also have these available as either Wi-Fi or Ethernet connected devices. So we recognize that in some locations, Wi-Fi signals are not super strong, and even some IT departments don't like to have Wi-Fi devices on their networks. And so internet connected devices there are appropriate products to utilize, and they connect to the cloud just the same as a Wi-Fi product would. And because it's hard to show a demonstration on the web while I'm doing the webinar, I just wanted to show you a couple of the common screenshots from how you would interact with these devices from your smartphone. So obviously when you open the app, you'll get quick information on what the current data is. You can click on one of those devices and look at the historical trend data for that. And of course you can zoom and move your fingers in a pinching motion in order to zoom in and zoom out. Or you can hover over a particular spot to get the exact specific data. You can manage all the settings for the devices, so you can change the alarm settings or change sample intervals or provide different naming conventions for the devices. And of course, you have access to the alarm history and can respond to the alarm and make notes, which are useful for regulatory audit purposes later on. And you also have access to manage users. So it's a very robust platform. Again, it's very akin to any type of internet connected device that you might have, you know, a Nest thermostat or Alexa at home, or you know, any type of internet connected device that you use. It's a very simple and user friendly. Okay, so now we are at the polling questions that Cindy and I didn't realize where the next polling question was. So we'll go ahead and pop that up on the screen. So before we get into talking about the transport data loggers, we wanted to understand, how confident are you today in knowing the temperature of your samples or your products along the entire transport journey? So think about this in the sense of, if I have to ship my temperature sensitive products, am I confident that I understand, did they stay in control the whole time, or would I have information that shows me that they went out of control for a certain period of time? Would it tell me what that time period is, or would it tell me how many times it may have gone out of control? So we will go ahead and everybody can put in their answers. And it looks like currently 65% of the respondents are somewhat confident, and 25% are about confident or confident, and then 10% are not confident. So that's interesting. I mean, the goal of this should be, you should be extremely confident that you understand the temperature of your products throughout this process. So Cindy's going to talk a little bit more about these cold chain transport data loggers now.
Yes, you absolutely should be a little more confident in your transport portion of our cold chain. Like, you know, we talked earlier about the storage, and to me, it's the one that doesn't move. Of course, transport implies the moving. So anytime you're moving a temperature sensitive product out of a refrigerator or freezer to another refrigerator or freezer, that's kind of the transport portion that we're going to talk about today. And the TraceableGO is the perfect example for this. You can see it's moving from the cold storage, transporting to the next location where there will be cold storage. So our TraceableGO lets you know what's happening during the transport. these data loggers, once again, meet the CDC's recommendations for transport data loggers. This is actually a Bluetooth data logger, so it connects to a Bluetooth smartphone or a tablet. But the unique thing on this one is, for example, is if you're transporting, let's say, from a pharmacy to a workplace clinic. I always got my flu vaccine, in the office where I worked, and so this one you can actually see on the digital display exactly what's going on, the min and max temperatures, if any alarms have occurred, so you can see right away what is going on. But then you can download the report, and in the example you can see here, so if I'm a courier transporting it from that pharmacy to a workplace vaccination administration location, it looks like here in the middle, there was a little bit of red. It was out a couple of minutes. But then further down the road, let's say, in Houston traffic, I had to come to a screeching halt on the freeway. Everything jumbles around in the back of my van and it spills everything out. So now I still have 30 minutes to go to get to this workplace administration site, and it's gotten too hot. So I can see on my display immediately. I take my Bluetooth phone, I download the report, look at it. Oh gosh, it's been out for, now 30 minutes to an hour. I call up the manufacturer. These particular, let's say the flu vaccine was exposed to, over 30 minutes of, above 10 degrees. Is it still okay? Is it not okay? So if it's not okay, it's very expensive for everybody involved. Like we saw, if you need to know before you give a vaccine, the viability of that vaccine. So with TraceableGO, you get all of that information, not only visually really quick on the digital display, but of course a report that shows you everything. So if your display says nothing is wrong, you just download the data and save it, connect it to your work trip, and you can prove that the vaccines you gave were temperature-wise fine. We have one other TraceableGO single-use data logger. Basically, I call it for kind of that last mile or out in the middle of nowhere, West Texas. So if you are transporting to the same kind of situation, workplace, you put it in a box instead, you ship it out to that location somewhere out in the middle of the desert. You throw in your traceable one. When it gets there, all you do is open it, plug it into your computer, up comes this file. And once again, you can tell whether your vaccine is still viable to give or if there's something's gone wrong with it and you have to call the manufacturer. So those are our couple of traceable transportation loggers. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it up here. I saw a couple of questions coming into the chat. So the traceable products brings your temperature monitoring into compliance. As you saw, all the ones we talked about today met the CDC's recommendations for compliance. For vaccines, it ensures that you've got the right product for the right requirement. And then we also have some advanced temperature monitoring capabilities, improving efficiencies and effectiveness. Now, I think Antimony's going to take over from here. I think she's got something exciting to talk to us about as well.
First, let me thank both of you, Cindy and Stephen, for all of that great information and also bringing us this great promo. So basically, guys, buy 3, you get 1 free. It's pretty simple. These are on select products, which are listed below. In a moment, we will have an order now button appearing to the right. Nice big orange button. If you click that button, it'll take you directly to the page that you need in order to get the redemption form that you will need to fill out. It has all the information, all the CAT numbers that you need. And we are now ready to start answering any questions that you guys may have. We already had a couple come up. So I think our first one was from Jim, who asked, do you have a panel mount type that we could put in the refrigerator or freezers that we manufacture? Obviously, this is going to be one of your guys' questions. I have no idea. It'd be great to have, though.
Cindy's at the manufacturing site, so I'll let her tackle that one.
Yes, we don't have one just ready to go to buy off the shelf. It doesn't mean we wouldn't want to have a quick call with you, see what your needs are, see if we can, work with you to create this. There is a side mount for refrigerators that's a little slip that you can put on the refrigerator that it slides to on the side. But we probably could figure out a way to work with you, on your particular refrigerator.
I'm not sure, Melissa, how to help you out on that one. You're not confident that they're going to the right place. Unless we have some GPS or something that we can help out with.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. From a cold chain transport perspective, you can get a wide variety of, temperature monitoring capabilities, which would include GPS or constant cellular communications. And sometimes those are the right types of logistics capabilities that are required for some products, but not everything is shipped requires GPS capability or constant communication or data streaming of the temperature. So certainly those capabilities do exist to monitor GPS, so you could see if it wasn't delivered to the right place, or if you absolutely had to have continuous data coverage. Cellular capabilities do exist. But then there's also, quite more frequently times where you need to have the information when it gets to the end destination, and that's really where our cold chain data loggers come. It's much more common in that scenario than to have the need for GPS or constant continuous data monitoring via cellular communication.
So Mike is asking, what type of -20 freezer is best for vaccine storage, manual or auto defrost? So from my experience, you never want a frost-free freezer, because that means that the temperature is fluctuating in order to get rid of the frost that's in the freezer. This is why we hired technicians to chip ice out of freezers.
Yes.
You guys both, everybody agree?
Yes, I'm not as knowledgeable about refrigerators, but it sounds reasonable. But to me, maybe that's another webinar for us further on down, is about refrigerators.
Yeah, if you want things to stay at a constant temp, you never want the freezer to be deciding when it's going to defrost based on the amount of ice that builds up on the wall, which is how I assume they are working, how they used to work. I'm not sure if it's still that way. Lauren did add the link in order to get to the redemption form as well, if the order now button didn't work for you. Dana, is there a unit that has a dynamic temp range, for example, -20 to 10 degrees?
Yeah, so all of our refrigerator freezer ones are from -50 to basically +70 degrees C. So they cover the entire range as far as the sensor will sense. And then you set your alarms to that -20 and that 10, if that's what you want to know, is if I'm answering what she asked.
Yeah,
what do you think, Stephen?
I think that's correct. Of course, all of these have to be calibrated, and they have the NIST calibrations associated with them. And those are fixed values depending on the range. So you certainly would not want to have a dynamic range that extends outside of that NIST calibration point. And so basically that NIST document kind of puts that range into perspective. You don't want to go outside of it, so you're kind of confined to the range within that document. But within that range, as Cindy mentioned, you can set the alarm points at any location. So it's dynamic in that sense. You can move and change within that range, but you would not want to extend outside of that range without moving to a different product. So if you needed to move from a refrigerator freezer to an ultra low temperature product, you would move to a different device.
Absolutely.
Good to know. Oh, Melissa, I feel you. 30K of reagents left at the police station. I had over 100K of drugs be left at a FedEx station in the sun. Not the best things to happen. Yeah, that's unfortunate and just sucks. Again, not sure, other than having a GPS or FedEx being able, or whoever was shipping it, be able to tell you where it is in its transportation to you. Those kinds of things get very difficult to deal with. Andrew is asking, is there a limit to the buy 3, get 1 free? So I'm assuming Andrew is asking, if we buy 6, can we get 2 for free? Or is it able to ramp this up?
Yes, we can work with.
Yes,
we can work with you on that for sure.
Great, that's awesome. That's always a good thing, since we have a lot of people with a lot of freezers and a lot of fridges doing stuff.
Yes, especially these days.
Okay. Oh, this is a long one. Okay. I have used these in the past. What ended up happening is the connection from the logger to the bottle was broken as the lab just shoved stuff in and out of the freezers. Yeah, that happens a lot. Do you have something to protect against this? I had 6 units and it happened to all of them. This kind of goes back, I think, to one of the first questions, where if we have, somewhere to place these things on and in the freezers and fridges.
Yeah, I mean, as I kind of look at this, I have to think about it. I mean, we have different types of bottles. It doesn't sound like the glass was broken here. It was the electrical connection. Yeah. And that can happen. I mean, typically, it's hard for me to comprehend exactly what's happened here, whether the connection was just physically pulled out or if it was, an electrical wire was broken because of friction from moving the products over that wire, or, it was just shoved really hard and that wire broke. Those are a little bit more challenging from an engineering perspective. So I think Jim was the one who commented earlier about the capability to monitor within the freezer itself, which certainly you have to have power supply running inside of the refrigerator or freezer in order to do that. So there's some challenges. I'm struggling a little bit here to provide a
and another option I thought of, some of the newer refrigerators and freezers sometimes have a port.
Yeah.
So that the wire or the cable is not running through the refrigerator door, and so you can run it through a port. Sometimes
snag on, maybe. Yeah.
And Cindy,
yes.
my last comment on this, and I'm kind of getting ahead of ourselves because we haven't announced this product, but probably in first quarter of next year, we will be launching a Bluetooth-based product, which will sit inside of the refrigerator or freezer and communicate outside via Bluetooth. So that might be the ultimate solution, but again, that's just not available currently, but stay tuned, I guess.
Yes, we've taken these comments like this one and are trying to figure out a solution for you guys.
Can the loggers be put in with the dry ice? So I'm assuming we're asking if any of the units can go directly onto the dry ice during shipping?
Not directly onto the dry ice. Cindy, maybe you can explain this one from a packaging perspective of how you would just place the probe inside of the...
Yes, so the probes and the cables are all rated to the temperature ranges that the thermometer is geared towards. However, the electronics are not. The electronics still need to remain, I call it ambient or, room temperature. So usually you do have to double box. So you have the box of dry ice. You've got your product in there. You put the probe in there, put the lid on. The cable kind of slips out through the the thing, and then you repack it into another box with the digital display on top. So that's kind of the way you have to do it, especially except for the single use one. That one you can throw right in, but it doesn't do that ultra low. So most things struggle with touching that ultra low dry ice situation.
Understandable, for sure. So I think we are doing a great job in answering questions. We're getting thank yous and awesome. This is actually an interesting one. So if I was to buy one of these, how do I know that it's working correctly? Or let's say it's a single use one. I'm pulling this out of this question. And I have this in there and it arrives where it's supposed to, and I plug it into my computer and nothing happens. Does that ever happen?
I guess it technically could. I haven't heard of it hardly. Yeah. Stephen, we can't hear you again.
Apologize about that. This is the single-use temperature data logger. So this is what it looks like. You can see that there's a start and stop button, and when you press that button, you will notice that the LEDs will flash on the red and green. So that is one indicator that you can quickly do to ensure that it's operating properly. So depending on how you push that start and stop button, you will be able to tell whether it's in alarm mode or whether it's functional. So during that transport process, you can quickly see whether it's working properly. And then of course, when it gets to the end destination, you'll plug it into the computer and it will download the report. So we guarantee it will work as far as you can guarantee that, people can take those actions, but, there are cases where things
so if you throw it in there and don't hit start, then it doesn't do anything.
Correct. Yeah.
You basically just gave somebody a free data logger. Oh, great. Looks like our next one is trying to go to the opposite side of cold and is asking about incubators and water baths. Do you guys, you said it went up to set, so I'm assuming you would have something that could read 37 degrees or...
Yes, instead of monitoring with like a bottle probe, for example, we have different types of probes that are used in water baths or incubators or high temperature ovens. We have, basically thermocouple type probes that are available as well. So there's a wide variety of probes and products depending on the application, but all of the products that we talked about have different types of probes available for ambient or incubators or water baths. So these are all available. Yes.
You guys just
even ovens. Yes, and also different parameters. We also have those USB data loggers also in humidity and barometric pressure if you need that as well, along with the TraceableLIVE connected ones. Stephen talked about all the different parameters.
Looks like we have 2 more questions and then we'll kind of wrap it up for the day. 3 now, that's fine. Let's see, Andrew is asking, how long is the calibration good for and what is the usable lifetime?
Yeah, so the calibration certificate comes with a 2-year timeline on it. So from calibration to when the certificate expires is 2 years. You can then either purchase a new one or return it for recalibration. We have been having some of these products come back in for several years. When they come back in to get recalibrated, calibration is still perfectly fine. There's no adjustment needed. So these devices, we have been on the market for over 3 years, over 5 years for the excursion track one. So they are normally, unless you use it and abuse it, it works perfectly fine for many, many years.
Great. So Bob asking, do you have a temperature monitor available with dry contacts to connect to the central alarm system?
At this point, we do not have that capability within the products that we mentioned during this webinar. We utilize the cloud-based hosting platform to provide the alarm notifications to specific users via email or text message or push notifications to the smartphone. And of course, there's also the audible and visual alarms on the device themselves, but currently we haven't integrated any type of dry contact closures.
Okay. And we'll take Chris's last. For these devices, is the temperature monitoring continuous or at specific intervals, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, etc.?
All of these have specific intervals that they monitor. So typically somewhere between 1 minute and 30 minutes. However, the monitors themselves are continuously monitoring. So if it goes out of control within that sample interval, it will provide that alarm notification at that particular time. But the sample intervals where it stores the data in memory are at those specific intervals that are user configurable. So the user sets what type of interval they desire.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I think that wraps it up for today. Again, thank you so much, Cindy and Stephen, for all of your expertise, your answering all these questions, and this great promo for us. That's awesome. Hopefully everybody gets a chance to use this and gets a chance to go out there and, well, go out there. Some places can go out there. I can't go out there. You can get in touch with your customers, your contacts, and get these great devices into labs and help everybody make sure that their vaccines and everything else get to their designated places on time and at the right temperatures.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.